Hey everyone, it's Marcus here. Today we're diving into the world of software development to talk about something crucial: code smells. Now don't worry, we're not talking about actual stinky cheese here, but rather those subtle hints in your code that something might be off. Just like a weird smell in your kitchen can lead you to a hidden mess, these code smells can point to deeper problems lurking within your code base. We're talking about things like confusing names, redundant code, and structures that just feel clunky. So whether you're a seasoned developer or just starting out, understanding these code smells can save you a ton of headaches down the road. We're going to break down 22 of the most common ones, explain why they're a problem, and show you how to fix them. Let's get started. First up, we've got mysterious name, which is exactly what it sounds like. Imagine opening up a file and seeing variables named x, temp, or data. It's like trying to understand a conversation where everyone's speaking in code words. Not cool. Clear and descriptive names are absolutely crucial in software development. When you use names that actually reflect what the variable, method, or class does, you make your code infinitely easier to read and understand. Trust me, future you and anyone else who might work on your code will thank you. Think of it like this. Would you rather navigate a city with clearly labeled streets and buildings, or wander around trying to decipher cryptic signs? Good naming conventions are like those clear street signs for your code. Next, we have duplicated code, and this one's a biggie. It's like having the same paragraph copied and pasted multiple times throughout an essay. It's just not efficient. Duplicated code is a recipe for disaster. When you need to make a change, you have to hunt down every single instance of that code and update it. Talk about tedious and error-prone. Plus, it bloats your code base, making it harder to navigate. The solution here is to follow the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. If you find yourself writing the same code in multiple places, it's a good sign that you need to extract it into a separate function or method. This way, you only have to write the code once, and you can call it from anywhere you need it. Now let's talk about long method. You know, those functions or methods that seem to go on forever, scrolling through screen after screen of code. Yeah, those are usually a bad sign. Long methods can be a nightmare to understand and maintain. They're often a sign that a method is trying to do too much, violating the single responsibility principle. This can make it difficult to track down bugs and make changes without breaking something else. The key here is to break down those massive methods into smaller, more focused ones. Think of it like writing a book. You wouldn't cram the entire plot into one giant chapter, would you? Break it down into manageable chunks, each with a clear purpose. Similar to long method, we have large class. This is when a single class becomes a dumping ground for a ton of unrelated functionality. It's like having a Swiss Army knife with every tool imaginable. Sure, it might seem cool at first, but it's probably not very practical. Large classes can be just as problematic as long methods. They often indicate that a class is trying to do too much, making it difficult to understand, test, and maintain. It's like that overstuffed suitcase you take on vacation. It's a struggle to find anything in there. The solution here is to refactor the class into smaller, more focused classes. Identify groups of related functionality and extract them into separate entities. This will make your code more modular, reusable, and easier to work with. Next up, we have long parameter list. This is when a method or function requires a laundry list of arguments, making it cumbersome to call and difficult to understand. Long parameter lists can be a real pain. They make your code harder to read and increase the likelihood of errors. Imagine trying to remember the order and purpose of 10 different parameters. To tackle this, try to reduce the number of parameters by grouping related ones into objects, using default values where appropriate, or breaking down the method into smaller, more focused ones. Remember, clarity is key. Now let's talk about divergent change. This code smell arises when you find yourself needing to modify multiple unrelated parts of a class when making a single change. It's like having to adjust the engine, the brakes, and the suspension just to change a flat tire. Divergent change is a sign that your class lacks cohesion. It's trying to do too many things, and changes in one area ripple out to affect others. This makes maintenance a real headache. The solution is to refactor your class, separating the different areas of responsibility into distinct entities. This will ensure that changes are localized and don't have unintended consequences elsewhere in your code base. Similar to divergent change, we have shotgun surgery. This code smell describes the opposite problem. Making a single change requires you to make small modifications to a whole bunch of different classes. It's like having to adjust every single piece of furniture in your house just to make room for a new lamp. Shotgun surgery is a sign of poor code organization. It indicates that your code is tightly coupled, making it difficult to make changes without causing a ripple effect throughout your code base. The solution is to identify the related pieces of code that are affected by these changes and try to group them together. This might involve moving methods to more appropriate classes or extracting common functionality into separate modules. Next up, we have feature envy. This code smell occurs when a method seems more interested in the data of another class than its own. It's like your neighbor constantly asking to borrow your tools instead of getting their own. Feature envy often indicates that a method might be better placed in the class it's so envious of. It's a sign that your responsibilities might be a bit skewed. To fix this, consider moving the envious method to the class whose data it's so interested in. This will improve encapsulation and make your code more cohesive. Let's talk about data clumps. This code smell arises when you see the same group of data variables appearing together in multiple parts of your code. It's like always seeing the same group of friends hanging out. At some point, you start to wonder if they should just get a place together. Data clumps often indicate that these variables are more than just loosely related. They might actually represent a distinct concept that deserves its own class. To address this, consider creating a new class to encapsulate these data variables. This will not only make your code more organized, but it will also make it easier to add behavior related to this data in the future. Now let's address primitive obsession. This code smell occurs when you rely too heavily on primitive data types like integers, strings, and booleans, even when they represent more complex concepts. It's like trying to describe a gourmet meal using only the words salty, sweet, and savory. You're missing out on a lot of nuance. Primitive obsession can limit your ability to model real-world concepts effectively in your code. Objects allow you to encapsulate data and behavior together, making your code more expressive and maintainable. To overcome this, consider creating classes to represent those concepts instead of just using basic data types. For example, instead of using separate variables for a phone number's area code, prefix, and line number, create a phone